Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2024 All-Party Interfaith Caucus. My name is Sherry Marcial and I'm the current chair of the Multi-Faith Summit Council of British Columbia and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are grateful for those who have accepted our invitation to be on our panel and speak today, and for those who have tuned in to listen as we focus on scientific advancement and spiritual commitment, finding balance for the sake of humanity. We're also grateful to have with us a guest moderator whom I will introduce shortly. Before we continue, here in North Delta, where I am situated, I just want to acknowledge that I am on the unceded and traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Katsi, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, and Stolo First Nations. We are grateful for their willingness to share the land with us and hope that we can contribute in a positive way to improve our relationship with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. If you would like to acknowledge the lands you are on and where you are joining us from, you may type that into our chat box below. Starting us off with an opening prayer today is Ankar Hans, a representative of Victoria Hindu Temple. Please go ahead, Ankar. Just wait and he'll unmute you. Samir, have you got that? Ankar is still muted.
He needs to unmute himself. I can only ask to unmute.
Okay. I think I'm unmuted now. Thanks for having me here. I'm Ankar Hans from Victoria. I'm actively member of Victoria Hindu Temple, and I'm pleased to share with you a beautiful Sanskrit prayer that resonates with all our common intentions and goals of universal brotherhood, harmony, and peace. It means that Sarvesham Swasthir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu, Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhna, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukh Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. It means, may there be well-being in all, may there be peace in all, may there be fulfillment in all, may there be auspiciousness in all, may all be happy, may all be free from disease, may all perceive goodness everywhere, may none suffer or experience any pain. Om, peace, peace, peace. Amen. Thank you very much.
Amen, and thank you.
Thank you.
The All-Party Interfaith Caucus has been a vehicle for the Multi-Faith Summit Council of BC to bring together those who serve us in public and members of our council so that we can dialogue on common concerns that are both relevant and timely. The focus again is scientific advancement and spiritual commitment, finding balance for the sake of humanity. Scientist Richard Feynman noted, quote, "We cannot afford to let technology and science take over to the point when the detriments outweigh the benefit," end quote. With some advancements in science, the Earth has become strained, leaving pollution in its wake, resource depletion and habitat destruction, while some technologies are being used to divide us and sow distrust in people and institutions which are there to serve us. And yet, common tenets among faith and spiritual traditions emphasize responsible environmental stewardship, moderation in all things, respect for all life, and love your neighbor. Today, our panel will discuss many of these points and hopefully provide some collective discernment and wisdom as they share their thoughts. Leading our panel through the discussion is our special guest moderator, Mr. Harpreet Singh. Harpreet is an accomplished journalist of more than 30 years and a multifaceted personality who has worked with the top print and electronic media outlets both in India and Canada. He is married with 2 sons, and many of us recognize him as the host of the Harpreet Singh Show. Harpreet believes in getting involved in community issues and giving back to the community, and we are pleased that he is giving some of his time to us today. Welcome to the Multi-Faith Summit Council's All-Party Interfaith Caucus. We are delighted to have you with us. The bulk of the program will be yours, and if you feel that there is an opportunity for additional questions, please prompt the audience to type their questions into the chat. This will be based on time availability. The panel will end its discussion at 2:20 p.m. in time for us to summarize and close the event. Harpreet, the time is now yours to introduce the panel and to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome today, and it's going to be a great, wonderful opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. And first of all, I would like to congratulate the Multi-Faith Summit Council of BC for organizing this wonderful program where a lot is at stake, and we're going to learn a lot because the topic is scientific advancement and spiritual commitment, finding balance for the sake of humanity. So humanity is at a crisis stage, and right now we need well-thought persons to come forward and start talking on those issues which matter to us. So I'll just let you know that we have 5 panelists who will be speaking today. And for each panelist, I would request that if you could speak within 4 minutes range. So please set your watches so that we don't go above the time frame. And if in case you go through 10, 15 seconds is fine, but if it is more, then I'll have to stop you over there. Nevertheless, we would like to start with Reverend Doug Longstaff, who is from United Church of Canada. And I would like to introduce him, and then we'll learn from him as to what he has to talk about this important issue. Doug is the Regional Director for Spiritual Care and Multi-Faith Services at Vancouver Coastal Health Authority. His work experience includes leadership and educational appointments in acute care across 3 provinces. He has written numerous articles in his field and has an avid interest in the humanization of institutions. Doug has spent many years advocating at various levels of governance for greater recognition of the importance of spiritual care. He's passionate about the humanization of institutions as well as integrative mind/body approach to healthcare. Doug is an ordained minister with the United Church of Canada and is a founding member of the Multi-Faith Summit Council of BC. So we welcome you, Doug, and over to you for the next 4 minutes. We would like to learn from you on this particular important topic.
Well, thanks, Harpreet. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Nice to know there's somebody else old enough to refer to watches rather than just myself on the committee. So that's great. Makes me feel at home. I'm not speaking on behalf of the United Church, just to be clear. I'm not speaking on behalf of Vancouver Coastal Health, my employer. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. But I'll try to frame this a little bit. Personally, I would have chosen a different way to frame this rather than how can we balance scientific advancement with spiritual commitment. I think the sentence would pose the question better if it talked not about balance, but about direction. So I think it's really about us finding a direction. And in that regard, I think René Girard, renowned French anthropologist, helps us when he says, we did not stop burning witches because we invented science. We invented science because we stopped burning witches. I use that at the bottom of my emails. I think it's so important. So it demonstrates the importance of attitude and community and mindset to discovery, including scientific discovery, obviously. And then Jacques Ellul, famous French sociologist, lawyer, and theologian, lay theologian, wrote of technate having its own life. That is technate, because we're not really talking about science, I think, today so much as application of science, applied science, which means technology, really. And Ellul back in the 1960s and 70s was writing about this area. It was way ahead of his time. There's now a Jacques Ellul Society, if anybody's interested. E-L-L-U-L is his last name. And Ellul said, whatever humans make, they will use. Whatever humans make, they will use, whether it's a can opener or an atom bomb. So far, he's been right. So if we're in a technological age where technology has a life of its own, very much so at a subconscious level, at a group level, involves a lot of major group think around the whole world, we can think of humanity as addicted, if you will, to its own means, Ellul would say, addicted to the means rather than to the ends. And if that's the case, we might want to think of ourselves, to frame this discussion today, as addicts. And so how do addicts approach a question like this? Often addicts are not known for having the most insight into their own condition. And so we're really looking at a major sort of approach at harm reduction like we've never thought of before. And of course, the worst thing to do would be to let go of the wheel at a time like this. So it's like we've been on a train, and the train is guided by the tracks through the previous centuries. Now we're at a point with our technology where we're in a Maserati and we don't know how to do anything but other than drive a train. And so what are we going to do? Well, don't let go of the wheel. That would be the first thing. That 19th century thinking of let the market decide will not work nowadays. And so we need to do something that involves us putting on our big boy pants, our big girl pants, and really try to step up to what is way ahead of our natural abilities in many respects to do. Our technology is so far ahead of our wisdom. But I think that's the main point. The main point is to take hold of the wheel and to listen to others. Politicians are finally going to have to make the major decisions, but they need to listen to philosophers, to theologians, and to others. And I think the role of the faith community should not be to be the perpetual royal opposition, throwing rocks at the government, but trying to help governments in all parties to reflect upon this major, perhaps the most major issue of our times, especially with AI now looming on the market, but in an atomic age anyways, it was already there at that level. So I think that's how I want to frame the dialogue for myself, at least anyways, is in this context of who's in the driver's seat and can we find a direction rather than sort of a balance of how much spirituality or how much science, or, I mean, I don't see it that way at all. But how are we going to make these decisions when we're really addicts who are acting at an unconscious level so often, and we've got such powerful tools, and the tools are leading us by the nose very much in a way that is not helpful to humanity. So that's all I have. I hope I'm under 4 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. You are right on dot. Thank you very much, Doug. And absolutely thanks for your opening remarks. Next in line is Ned Taylor, who is representing the Green Party. And Ned Taylor was born and raised in Saanich. And when he was just 19 years old, he made history by being elected as the youngest ever Saanich councillor and CID director. From 2018 to 22, he served in these roles, advocating for affordable housing, better transportation networks, and action on climate change. He's now running as the BC Green Party's candidate in Saanich South. And outside of politics, he's working towards acquiring his pilot's license and looks forward to a career in aviation. He's very grateful to be here today, and we welcome Ned. And for the next 4 minutes, you are on stage, and it's all over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much to the organizers for putting this discussion together. It's I'm very honored to be here. As Harpreet said, my name is Ned Taylor. I'm coming to you today, speaking to you today from the unceded territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I'd like to also acknowledge I was born and raised in what is now referred to as Saanich, but what is the unceded territories of the Wasanich First Nations, Sartlip, Sayout, Saicum, Malahat, and Pakwachin nations. So I'm very grateful to be here today. I'm very grateful to have been able to grow up in this beautiful corner of the world. I've lived here my entire life. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I started to get involved in politics, and then also speak to what I believe is important for the topic today. And I'll try to keep it within 4 minutes, but that's of course asking a lot of a politician. We tend to like to speak for long periods of time sometimes. So I first got involved in politics when I was 15, 16 years old, when I was attending Reynolds Secondary. And I started to get involved with the BC Green Party. Actually, that was one of the first things that I did in politics. And I saw back in the 2017 provincial election where I volunteered, I got involved, I felt that I contributed to that campaign, and I saw the BC Green Party gain balance of power in that election and use that, what they actually would often refer to as balance of responsibility rather than the balance of power. They used that position to actually make tangible changes for people in this province. And it was at that moment that I stopped feeling powerless as an individual, and I started to feel empowered. And I felt that I, as just one person, as one individual, could actually get involved in our political systems, in our democratic processes, and make a difference for people in the community. And so shortly after graduating high school, I decided to run for Saanich Council. I saw that there was a Saanich Council by-election called. It was called due to the sad and sudden passing of late Councillor Vic Derman, who was an environmentalist and a voice for sustainability on council and in the community. And I wanted to continue his legacy. And so I ran in that by-election at the young age of 18. And I didn't get elected then, but I finished 5th out of 10 candidates. I was pleased with that result, and I decided to continue with that effort. And I ran again in the general election approximately 1 year later, and I found myself elected to Saanich Council and the CRD board. And for the next 4 years, I had the honor of serving the people in the community that I had grown up in. And I felt, having now concluded that term, I'm no longer on Saanich Council and CRD. I chose not to run for re-election the last election. But having now concluded that term, I felt that I was able to contribute positively towards addressing climate change, improving transportation, and addressing affordable housing. And so I feel very privileged for that opportunity. Now I am running provincially in the upcoming provincial election with the BC Green Party in Saanich South. And one of the main things that I'm focusing on right now in my campaign and my candidacy is listening to people. And that brings me to my theme for today's discussion, which is the importance of listening and being able to engage in respectful dialogue. I think one of the things that I've been worried about in recent years is some of the toxicity and divisiveness that has existed in our public discourse. And I think that what is most important, whatever issue it may be, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the drug poisoning crisis, whether it's housing, whether it's climate change, whatever issue it may be, it's so important that we are able to listen to each other, even if we might have differing views, and be able to engage in dialogue that is respectful and that is productive. I understand lots of people right now, they're worried, they're frustrated about the problems that are facing communities right now. That's understandable. But we need to be able to work together, because guess what? If we might have differing views, we might come from different places, we might have different beliefs, but we're all here together on this one shared planet. And despite what Elon Musk might think, there is no planet B. That's certainly my opinion. And so collaboration is going to be the key to our ability to address these very difficult and complex challenges. And I hope to be a part of that, not only in this discussion, not only as potentially an MLA come October, but as a human being who's here sharing this world with the rest of us. So thank you very much for having me and for creating this discussion today.
Thank you, Ned. Thank you for your talk and for your opening remarks. Next in line, we have Umran Bhatti, who is from the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. Umran ul Haq Bhatti is a missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, and Umran acquired his degree in Islamic theology and comparative religions in 2013. In Canada, he has he has also served in Ghana, Atlantic Canada, and Toronto. During his 4 years in Atlantic Canada, he was a monthly columnist writing for the local newspaper to remove the misconceptions about the peaceful teachings of Islam and build bridges in the community. He is the Imam of the Baitur Rahman Mosque in Delta. And the slogan for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat is love for all, hate for none. And that's a wonderful message which has been given. So over to you, Umran Bhatti, for the next 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Harpreet. And once again, thank you for having me here with the short information in the bio. As my previous two speakers, I'm trying to pull a hat trick here, try to get it done under 4 minutes. Hopefully there won't be any disruption, and I'll try to get it done as soon as possible. I'd like to start out with a short prayer from the Holy Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I seek refuge with Allah from the Satan and rejected. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. Today we're talking about a very interesting topic that is very much in detail mentioned in the Holy Quran, which is the Holy Scriptures for the Muslims. And just before we do go into the actual topic, a little bit about the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and who do I represent. As you know, that there are many different sects and many different denominations within the religion of Islam. So the community that I represent is called the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and it is that community which believes in the long-awaited Messiah and Prophet and Imam Mahdi, under the name of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian has appeared. He actually appeared in 1889, and he founded the community under divine guidance. And at that time, 40 devout followers accepted him. But now, by the grace of God, we are well established in more than 200 countries with millions of followers all around the world. And here in Canada, we have branches from Victoria all the way down to St. John's, Newfoundland as well. And under the divine leadership of His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who is the Caliph of the current Ahmadiyya Muslim community. So with this, I'm going to go right into the topic. This topic actually is very well mentioned in the Holy Quran, as if you study, there is a verse in the Holy Quran which is in chapter 59, verse 25. And I'll just read the Arabic and I'll follow with the translation, which says that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Huwallahu al-Khaliqul Bari'ul Musawwiru lahul asma'ul husna yusabbihu lahu ma fis samawati wal ard wa huwal azizul hakim. The translation is that He is Allah, the Creator, the Maker, the Fashioner. His are the most beautiful names. All that is in the heavens and all that and the earth glorifies Him, and He is the mighty, the wise. So we know that in technology, many information, many prophecies have actually been mentioned in the Holy Quran regarding the advancement of this. And this prophecies and these revelations were given to the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him. And some of these prophecies, just to briefly explain, have been already mentioned. For example, the system of airport transportation, and the system of when it says that the she-camel 10-month pregnancy will no longer be used in the latter days, meaning to advancements of transportation, whether it be cars, or transportation on railroads, or as we now say, air travel right now. And not only that, but other technology, for example, the advancements of what we see, for example, laptops, TVs, all these things have been already well delved into the teachings of the Holy Quran. And as Muslims and Islams, we actually do take full benefit of this. And not only that, we try to use these technologies to make our lives better, because these are creations from God Almighty. These are things that are helping with the human minds and to cope all around the world. And right now, because of this technology, we are called the global village. Whether because of this, some people are in Victoria, some people are here, some people are over there. But because of this, we are very well connected, and within seconds, we are able to connect with our friends, colleagues, loved ones all around the world. So these prophecies, these type of technology have been mentioned many times beforehand in the Holy Quran, and we use these as to help ourselves to help to spread the message of one God, to help spread the message of Islam and Ahmadiyya to the corners around the world. And not only that, but we also see that with technology, there's also which is used for wrong information as well, wrong sorts of criminal activities. But with all that stuff, we can also use technology for a good use as well, where we see, and for example, Islam, we see that in terms of social media, in terms of other places, there have been a lot of misinformation, miscommunication. So we use this to spread peaceful teaching and peaceful messages, not only about Islam, but in general religion, and in matter of facts all around the world as well. Where we have the Caliph of Islam, who is residing in London, UK, but through technology, we can see and listen to his live addresses, live speeches, live programs through the MTA Muslim Television Ahmadiyya channel, which is broadcasted live.
Thanks, Umran.
On there as well. So thank you again. I know that 4 minutes flies by quickly, so I'll give it back to Harpreet, Mr. Harpreet. And
thank you very much. Thank you. I was about to think that we're going to hit a hat trick, but nevertheless, thank you very much to stay within the time. Next in line, we'll have Michael Lee, who is the MLA from Vancouver, Langara, British Columbia. And he's a member of the BC United Party. Michael was elected as MLA for Vancouver, Langara in 2017 and currently serves as the Shadow Minister for Attorney General and Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Michael is the Deputy Chair of the Select Standing Committee on Parliamentary Reform, Ethical Conduct Standing Orders and Private Bills, and is a member of the Select Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs and Select Standing Committee on Legislative Initiatives. Prior to his election, Michael was a business lawyer and partner with Lawson London LLP, and before obtaining his law degree at the University of Victoria, he worked as a special assistant to the Right Honourable Kim Campbell in Vancouver and Ottawa. He also holds a BSc in Biology, a BA Honours in Political Science, and a Master's degree in Political Science with a focus on environmental regulations. Michael has also served as a past Vice Chair and Board Member of Sciences World British Columbia. and is a past board member of the Justice Education Society of British Columbia, Sustainable Cities International, and the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association. Michael was born and raised in Vancouver, and he and his wife, Christina, had 3 young adult children. Welcome, Michael. For the next 4 minutes, stage is with you.
Thanks, Harpreet, for the introduction. It's good to see so many others here and the panelists to join this panel. I am speaking from the traditional territories of the Musqueam peoples. I gratefully accepted the invitation of Multi-Faith Summit Council of British Columbia, and certainly have participated in other discussions, both interfaith and multi-faith. I would say that these are very important discussions to be having. Even in this juncture, when we talk about some of the topics that the 3 panelists already have touched on to date, certainly from the public policy government perspective in the opposition, I would say that the need to maintain a level of respect for respectful dialogue that Ned spoke to, I certainly recognize that from the leader of the Green Party, Sonia Furstenau, and Andrew Weaver before that. In terms of the need, just in terms of how we have dialogue in Victoria and the Legislative Assembly. I would say that I have had much good opportunity to visit with the mosque in Delta on River Road, and I'm very struck, as the Imam just talked about, by the theme and commitment around love for all and hate for none. I believe that that's the reason why, as I discussed last time on a similar panel, the importance of religious freedom and understanding values is an important teaching, even in the face of misinformation on social media through the channels that we continue to see. And that misinformation comes from all sorts of directions, religious or non-religious related. And I believe that it's promoting understanding and love, the understanding of togetherness, that we need to continue these efforts. In terms of what Doug spoke to in terms of letting go of the wheel, I agree with him as well. And Doug and I have had some past interactions in the course of the pandemic. And as I did with some of the other members of the Multi-Faith Summit Council. And I wanted to just refer to that because I do think it's useful to talk about some examples of some of the challenges, either to find the balance or to acknowledge that there needs to be greater recognition of religious freedoms, values. I was raised a Catholic. I went to Vancouver College, a Catholic boys' school in Vancouver, in my riding, Vancouver Langara, for 12 years. Before that, I went to preschool at the Jewish Community Center. I've certainly been spending a lot of time with constituents of mine, both in the Muslim community and in the Jewish community as well as the Sikh community. I would say during the pandemic, the constraints from government around faith-based gatherings was a use of science of some sort to restrict what was clearly a worldwide pandemic. Certainly for worldwide public health orders, certainly recognize and respect that. But I do think that when governments use science as a tool for their own purposes, ideological or otherwise, to restrain and constrain faith-based gatherings, as we saw with many different religions across this province. And to date, even as my colleague Mike DeYoung, the member from Abbotsford West, had questioned the current government about in May, just this last month, as the session was concluding, we have a government that continues to actually, with their legal claims, legal proceedings against churches in our province for violating health orders from the last over 3 years ago. So I question the mix, let's say, of when governments utilize science over religion. We have to be very careful about that. I think we have to recognize what is going on. And I think that's the reason why we need to have greater recognition, respect for religious freedoms, values, and perspectives. We need to deal with the false information. And we need to recognize that there is a role, certainly, to understand the context of where the world is going, to ensure that we have a strong foundation, because with the advancement of the digital AI world, there needs to be somebody holding on to the wheel, as Doug eloquently put. I think that that is a recognition of what values we bring to our leadership decisions.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Michael, thank you very much for your initial remarks. And of course, we'll be having time to interact more on this important topic. So our next speaker is Aaron Kelly from the Baha'i community. Aaron Kelly has a master's degree in energy regulation and law and is a Juris Doctor from Vermont Law School. He's an attorney with extensive knowledge and experience with solar energy, green building, and sustainable transportation. He's a founder of Turnbridge Solar, a solar development company bringing renewable energy to Vermont. Aaron's website, My Carbon Goals, which is mycarbongoals.com, offers useful information and a practical approach to climate change action. Originally from Texas, Aaron enjoys nature photography and hiking. And along with that, Aaron's work is informed by his principles of the Baha'i faith, including justice and service for the well-being of humanity and the environment. Welcome, Aaron, for the next 4 minutes. The stage is yours.
Thank you for your warm introduction. I'm a Baha'i. The Baha'i faith has no clergy, so I'm simply a Baha'i and occupy no position of authority within the faith. To be a Baha'i simply means to love all the world, to love humanity and try to serve it, to work for universal peace and universal brotherhood. In the Baha'i writings, science is viewed positively, and Baha'i teachings emphasize that faith and science are not at odds. Science, which is the application of reason and logic to understanding reality, is viewed with high regard. According to the Baha'i writings, scientific knowledge is the highest attainment upon the human plane, for science is the discoverer of realities. It is of two kinds, material and spiritual. Material science is the investigation of natural phenomena. Divine science is the discovery and realization of spiritual verities. The world of humanity must acquire both. Faith and science are seen as both necessary for human progress. Religion and science are the two wings upon which men's intelligence can soar into new heights, which the human soul can progress. It's also interesting to consider two prominent scientists' perspectives on faith, I would say. Albert Einstein wrote that science can only be created by those who are thoroughly imbued with the aspiration toward truth and understanding. This source of feeling, however, springs from the sphere of religion. To this, there also belongs the faith in the possibility that the regulations valid for the world of existence are rational, that is, comprehensible to reason. I cannot conceive of a genuine scientist without that profound faith, said Albert Einstein. So I am in agreement with Doug. Let me just increase my mic is on max here. So sorry about that. I'm in agreement with Doug that there's a distinction between science and technology, where science is the understanding of spiritual and material truths. Technology involves the application of human creativity and scientific understanding to the development of new ways of doing things. Technology is a tool that can be used productively or destructively. One example of productive technology is the development of solar panels, which represent 3/4 of new electric generation capacity additions globally and are powering a decisive move away from fossil fuels. On the other hand, we have the rise of deepfakes, which are tricky videos and photos that appear real, but are in fact depictions generated by a machine, which can be used for nefarious purposes like influencing elections. Faiths have a responsibility to bring humanity forward spiritually, to foster unity among peoples and address material needs in the community. Faith can provide a moral compass for innovators that helps guide the development of technology toward the service of the well-being of humanity and the environment rather than to its detriment. And government has a responsibility as steward of the common good, a responsibility which is long-term in nature, transcending political cycles. Government can prevent technology from being used for harmful purposes like proliferation of deadly weapons, disinformation, and deepfakes. And governments can also help advance adoption of beneficial solutions that science and technology develop, like seatbelts, airbags, and energy efficiency standards, and can stimulate the creation of innovations which benefit humanity. Technological changes affect values, culture, and our social reality. It is therefore important that on the individual and collective levels that we use and grow our capacities for reflection and discernment to consider the technological choices that we are making. According to Matt Weinberg, who's an American Baha'i, the overall vision guiding pathways of technological development and use cannot come from technology itself. It must be informed by essential ideals, spiritual insight, and actual participatory practice that promotes the common good.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your insight into this particular topic. So once again, thank you to all the panelists, Michael Lee, Ned Taylor, Doug Longstaff, Aaron Kelly, and Umran Bhatti for your opening remarks. So for the next about 20-25 minutes, we're going to have interaction between each of us. And if our viewers who are online want to ask any questions, I would request you please put it in the chat, and then we can take it over from there. But before that, there are some questions which we would like to know from the panelists. And I would like to start with Michael. I would like to learn from you as to what do you think, what should government and faith communities expect of each other in these challenging times?
Well, I think something that Ned said earlier, I think something as simple as listening, oftentimes governments ideologically get wrapped up in, and I'm speaking generally here because obviously this is a nonpartisan discussion, but I think governments can get wrapped up in their particular ideological perspective, let's say. And I would say that because of the nature of religious leaders and leadership in congregations, that it is something that I know members on many sides of the House in Victoria have good respect for. But respect and understanding and even engagement is something different from government agendas where discussion and debate are shut down. I don't mean legislatively, I just mean from a particular perspective. Because I do think that the balance, when we don't have the balance and the understanding, and we don't allow that in, then we have challenges. I think governments and even legislative assemblies have an opening prayer before the House sits. There's a recognition of the importance of faith and reflection. But it's got to be more than just lip service, right? It's got to be real. And I think that certainly the kind of outreach that religious leaders do, including through the Multi-Faith Summit Council on a regular basis, is important. That level of dialogue is important, and I think we want to continue to encourage the recognition of the roles that each of you play.
Interesting. While we'll be asking questions with the panelists also have an opportunity to ask any question if they have in their mind from either of the panelists. Other question that we are talking about is that this scientific advancement is not going to halt. Over the years, we're going to see much more advancement in scientific advancement, I would say. And keeping that in mind, Mr. Ned, I would say that while you are young, you have worked at the base level and you have seen, you're talking about climate change, but along with that, when it comes to the spiritual commitment, how can, as Michael was pointing out, that what do you feel, what can be done that we cooperate for the common good? And irrespective of your political affiliations, but when it is the common ground where we have to progress as a community, as a nation, what should be done?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I think it does come back to being able to have those respectful dialogues and those discussions. I remember when I was on the CRD board, It's a board of 24 members. People represent different communities and people have many differing views. And so I found oftentimes there would be, some very strong disagreements and some very vigorous debate. And although I think that was also very healthy, what we were able to do oftentimes, and I had a particular situation with one other board director who we basically disagreed probably 99% of the time. We had very different viewpoints, but we were able to also, after the board meeting, have a laugh, have a good discussion, and still have respect for one another despite that disagreement. So I think that's really important. And look, we have to also recognize that we're dealing with complex challenges in the world right now. It's not going to be simple to fix healthcare in British Columbia. It's not going to be simple to make housing more affordable for people. And we're only going to be able to get there if we're able to collaborate, whether it's government, faith communities, industry, members of the public. We're only going to be able to get there if we work together. And so I think that is certainly my priority as someone who's who has been involved in politics and is wanting to continue to get involved in politics now at the provincial level. I think that's what's really important, and that's something that I'm trying to do right now during my candidacy and in my campaign, is knock on doors and ask people, what do you think is important? What do you think that we should be focusing on, rather than knocking on someone's door and saying, here's my idea. Certainly, I want to talk about what I think too, but also I want to create that space for people to be able to tell me what they'd like me to focus on as their representative, but also just as someone else who shares this community with them.
Interesting. Okay, Doug, what do you feel? How can we integrate scientific advancement with our moral concerns and aspirations? Could you unmute yourself, Doug, please?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now you're fine. Yes.
Now, so to get back to what I was saying before, I think everything is colored by the experience in our head and the experience between our heads. So my mind and your mind. And so we're going to talk a lot about different decisions in concrete, practical terms, whether it's AI or whether it's atomic energy or whatever it is. But if we are like addicts, or if we are like alcoholics in relationship to our own means, to our own technology, and we don't acknowledge it, if we're not aware of it, nothing's going to make much difference. And all you have to do is look south of the border to see the degree that groupthink can take on. So let's use the Americans and keep it out of our context. As Michael says, we don't want to be too partisan here. So we can talk about the American experience. I see things happening down there that make me feel like I'm in a surreal universe for the last, well, what has it been since Trump came to power the first time, 8 years or something. And now he might get in again. Something has radically shifted, and people are not aware of their own behaviors to the degree that they used to be. And I'm not saying they were terribly aware before, but we are in a state of drunken stupor almost, I would say, in terms of what's happening politically, certainly south of the border. And really, I mean, the issue to me is, first of all, what's in your head? What's in your heart? Are you self-aware? Are we aware of groups in terms of the group think and what's going on? And that's always going to be applicable, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's talking about AI or whatever it is. But if we're not bothering to look at that level, I'm sorry, I don't have much hope for us. So fundamentally, I would say the issue is a spiritual issue, as much as I believe that the politicians are the ones that are going to make the decisions and should be the ones to make the decisions about many things that have to do with technology. I don't want to leave it to the marketplace. I do think that we have to get a hold of ourselves first.
That's very true. Absolutely. You very aptly said we have to get hold of ourselves first, and that is what we need to work on. Thank you. Umran, how is scientific knowledge and spiritual guidance related to?
Yes, thank you, Harpreet. So as I mentioned, scientific knowledge which has always been at the forefront of the education system that is being moving on. But even with this advancements, as Muslims, we have been, as we see the golden era in Islamic period, many Muslims, for example, invented many things, whether it is in physics, in the chemistry, in medicine. All of these things, Muslims have been at the forefront. Even recently, the very first Ahmadiyya Muslim Nobel Laureate Prize, Dr. Muhammad Abdul Salam for Pakistan, was the very first Ahmadi Muslim and a Muslim to win a ever Nobel Laureate Prize. So Islam generates a theme of making sure that we advance in all types of fields and advancements. And in terms of spirituality, it goes in hand. And if you look at how many of the Nobel Laureate Prize and even Dr. Abdul Salam had mentioned that all of my advancements, all of my thinking and all of my understanding was based from the teachings of the Holy Quran. And there's a very famous documentary also available on Netflix on how he was able to achieve that prize and how was he able to achieve that Nobel Laureate Prize in 1971. So in short, it doesn't matter how much advancement we do, we always come back to the foundation of one God. We always come back to the teaching of the Holy Quran, even though it might have been prophesied and mentioned by the Holy Prophet of Islam 1400 years ago. Even to this day, it lives as a living book to all the Muslims around the world.
Okay, great. Aaron, what do you think that can technology and economic development be sustainable and indigenous friendly? Because generally it is thought that when we talk about economic development, that doesn't go hand in hand with the sustainability.
I think that it can be, putting on my hat as a student of regulatory law, as I studied environmental policy and energy regulation and law. I think there needs to be direction from government that internalizes the costs to society, to indigenous, to the environment of negative externalities or adverse impacts to these groups, so that different choices are made, and where necessary, perhaps there need to be regulations that prevent people from harming other people, like in the case of pollution, air pollution, water pollution, that can lead to cancer and death for people. So that's my personal feeling on that, and that's my answer to your question.
Okay, and now it's like we play the Jeopardy or some other game. The first person who unmutes will be able to ask from each other, the panelists. Now you have the opportunity for the next few minutes that if you want to ask any question to each other, the stage is open for you. Any question between yourselves. So Doug, you are unmuted. So you want to ask some question?
No, I was just naturally unmuted. It's just
Okay, no worries.
for me.
So is there any question from the panelists? Yeah, Ned is unmuted himself. Yes, Ned, go ahead.
Well, thanks very much for this opportunity. I'd actually like to ask Michael a question as a much more experienced politician than I am. Is there any one thing or number of things that you've learned during your time in elected office that you could share with someone like me who's getting involved?
Well, Ned, I appreciate the question, and I looked at your bio before this session, and I think, like you and many others, we have our roles to play, whether it's whatever roles we play in community are all roles of responsibility, and I think those who have opportunity to run for public office. Not everyone does, because not everybody is prepared to, as you know, make that sacrifice in terms of their privacy, their impact on their families, the misinformation that we've touched on here. Well, there's so much of that goes on. But I do think my involvements, like you, started when I was also around your age. And I think that everyone has a different time of life to be involved. I think that obviously it seems like you've made decisions as to where you'd like to be involved and why. I think I was just meeting with another person considering running for public office this morning, and the discussion really was around principles and values. There's a lot that we take from our learnings from each other about why we do what we do. And it's not just about winning, it's about what you stand for. And obviously, with the Green Party, your party does stand for quite a bit, of course, principally and otherwise. I certainly recognize that. I think that understanding why and what you bring is important. And when you speak from strength, with your feet on the ground, like most things in life, you speak to the truth. And I'd say that in the face of what Doug was talking about earlier, I in my view, as well, 2016 changed a lot of things. It gave license to voices in society that, I don't disagree. They don't have freedom of expression, of course, they do. But the groupthink, as Doug mentioned, is a real challenge. That polarization that we see. So I do think having a clear message and a clear understanding and clear values, which again, as I said last session, this is where spirituality and religion do play a very important role, because they're not exclusive. They ought to have common dialogue, and we need more of that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Artificial intelligence is and will have a major impact on us is having, as I said, and will have in the coming times also. What, if anything, needs to be done to handle the reality and impact of artificial intelligence on the society to ensure responsible use and advancement with this technology? Any of the panelists can answer this. Nobody coming forward? Then I'll have
hi.
to.
Hello.
Yes, Aaron. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Edward Wong. Can anybody hear me? All hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
Aaron, we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I posted a message on chat. Can anybody see it? And it's
Edward, I'm sorry, we don't have time to go into that. A question
I think that's relevant to what we're talking about. If you're
Edward?
interested. Oh, okay.
Edward, this time is for the panel, please.
Yeah, after we finish off, I'll be opening up the line for the participants also for some time. So you can type in whatever you want to say.
Okay,
And
sorry
we'll ask you from there.
about that.
Thank you. Yes, please. Any of the panelists would like to answer my question?
Yes.
Yes, Aaron.
So in the Baha'i faith, truthfulness is the foundation of all virtues. And as a result, there's I think, an inherent conflict between truthfulness and some of what comes out of AI, like the deep fakes, because those are the artificial depictions of videos, voices, and pictures that can trick people. And that's not an honest thing to do. So I do think there needs to be some intervention that deep fakes and whatnot aren't just allowed to proliferate and affect people's attitudes and interfere with what otherwise would be fair elections,
Okay, great. And regarding this question only, Shari is saying that people are asking all the panelists to comment on this particular question. So over to you, Michael. And what do you say about this? What do you feel?
There is a lot changing in the artificial intelligence space, and governments have struggled in some regards to ensure that regulations and legislative frameworks can stay ahead of the pace of very rapid change. And I understand that from the sector, so to speak, that that pace of change is surprising even those in the sector. So it is hard for governments to ensure that data governance, beyond the examples we're speaking about here, the misuse of the platform. Not to mention, as we share more data in a data-driven world with government, as more data is being accessed by AI platforms, that the use of that data can be for good purpose. And I'm certainly of that school. For good public policy purpose, when we recognize patterns in society, whether it's public health, gaps in education, challenges of transportation systems, to how to make things more efficient but also effective, better use and allocation of resources, meaning our taxpayer dollars and all of that. But I do think, though, the downside needs to be appropriately managed, and it is a challenge. I think in Europe there have been stronger standards, certainly around data use and data regulation, and to the extent that we're able to have corporations act responsibly, which is what we would expect. Not to mention, dealing with some of the things that Aaron already touched on relating to the environment. But when we're talking about this area, there needs to be a greater expectation placed by governments on corporations to act responsibly, because it is a very powerful tool.
Thank you, Michael. Imran, what would you like to say on this?
Yes, thank you. As we know that with the advancement of AI, as previous speakers have mentioned, even though that there's so much information available, but a lot of information is not accurate and true as well. So with this, we as an imam of the Ahmadi Muslim community as well, we have to make sure that we educate our members. We have to educate as many people as possible that how to use this technology for the benefit and advancement of information. Yes, it's all out there. It will be out there. And as we know, as some places in Europe and other places, this information, this technology have been used for negative contacts, illicit videos, and vulgar photography. And kids are getting affected by this. So we have to educate to let them know and how to steer this towards for the betterment of society, for the betterment advancement of technology. And with all technology, there's always a good side and a bad side. And unfortunately, with AI right now, the ugly side is being more portrayed. This is what happens. This was, and as the government, as Mr. Lee mentioned before, has to do a lot of this in terms of how to make sure that children or other people are not affected by this, because there will be a time where we have no idea what information is true, what information is based. So even when you do search up, whether it's ChatGPT or other information, the references, as a scholar, when I look up references, sometimes they're not accurate. So you have to go back to the original context, the original place of where you started, and make sure that everything is collected. Because as I say, it will feed you, it will give information what it feeds. So I can feed information, other people can feed information, but if it's incorrect, then it's based on you to make sure that you find this, and we educate members of the people and the general public how they can use this in the most effective way for the betterment of society and of humanity as well.
Thank you, Imam. Doug, what do you have to say on this? Could you unmute yourself, please, first? Yeah. Thank you.
Let me come from a different vantage point and call upon all lawyers. I think we've got a couple of lawyers on here right now. We've left so much to the business community, so much to the marketplace at times, and it hasn't worked out terribly well. Often, in some cases, it does, but we're not in the 19th century anymore, as I mentioned earlier. Gentleman I mentioned earlier, Jacques Allot, was a lawyer who was actually professor of institutions in the Faculty of Law at the end of his life at the University of Bordeaux. There was a lawyer who engaged in sociology and in theology and in philosophy. I think we're lacking from that field of people a lot right now. I think they need to come to the fore because they have that bridge between philosophy and business. And I think if they would bring their legal minds to bear on this, it would help us a lot. I'm not brilliant enough to know the answers to these things, but I do think that jurisprudence, the legal system, is the only thing that's going to save potentially some of these situations what we have in the United States. And we've already seen some good things happen up here. If you ask Indigenous people, they'll say one of the decent things they got from the British colonizing Canada, which was mostly a bad news story for them, was that they did bring British law. And so now you find a lot of lawyers who are Indigenous. They'd like to have more doctors. They're very clear on that. But they have a lot of lawyers because they can actually win suits. And they're actually advancing their causes for justice through the legal system with lawyers. So I think this area of technology is largely going to be dependent upon what kind of laws we bring in. So the lawmakers, yes, the politicians, but a lot of politicians are lawyers, and they all have access to lawyers. So I think we need to call upon all lawyers to get involved on a moral level, on a philosophical level, and bring their expertise to bear on this rather than in other areas so much.
Thank you. That's a very interesting point that you have raised, and definitely that will make some more difference in what we are talking about. Okay, a few minutes I would like to give now again to the panelists. If any question is to, oh, I'm sorry, Ned, we forgot you to answer on this. So over to you, Ned, on this issue of artificial intelligence.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's certainly quite fascinating, just the development and the change that we've seen in that area over the number of years. I can remember when I was first attending school growing up as a kid, and I can remember in our classrooms we were often told about you can't, for example, go online, copy and paste something and claim it as your own, right? If you're writing a paper or an essay or whatever it may be. At that time, I didn't hear much about the concerns about AI like we do now in that regard. So I think that's perhaps one example of something that post-secondary institutions are having to think about, because now it's not just going online and copy and pasting something that another human has written, but using AI to write something for you, and then potentially there could be concern about claiming that as your own. So that's just one example of many concerns that I think have come to light as AI has developed. But there's also it's not all dim and grim. I mean, there's also benefits that AI can offer us, right? So I think we need to pull together here as a community and try to find ways and measures to ensure that we can use AI to our benefit, but also make sure that we're addressing concerns that can come up as well. And I think one of the things that Aaron mentioned about deep fakes and that sort of thing, that's a very, very valid concern. That's something that we need to be thinking about quite seriously. So it's not going to be easy. There's benefits to AI, but there's also challenges and concerns that we need to be mindful of. So absolutely that needs to be a priority for us as we move forward. And like Michael said, that there's rapid change, rapid development. So it's not going to be easy to keep up, but we're going to need to try.
Okay. Doug, with your experience in this field for a long time, when you talk about spiritual commitment, what do you think, where are we lacking today? Well, we are talking about the advance in sciences, but over the years, as we see that we are not having that spiritual commitment, the universal values, what all religions have been preaching and we've been proud of, they're just remaining in the books only now. It's more of a lip service rather than when it comes to practice. We are just getting behind that. So what do you think, what needs to be done on that particular aspect whereby we can become stronger in our values and commit to spiritual advancement?
Well, values is certainly very important to everything. It's foundational. However, it's not only our values, but how we hold them, how we hold our beliefs, how we hold our values we teach our students is more important than what they are in many cases. So we have different beliefs, we have different values even, but how do we hold them? And in terms of commitment, we have to remember grace as well. So we're all limited. We can only do so much. How can we look upon each other with soft eyes and have grace for one another is where I'd probably start. And a practical question of that, where that would go practically, would be, are we praying for our politicians? So people like to deride politicians. They like to make fun of them. And some of them deserve it. I agree. But are you praying for the ones that are hanging in there? I remember years ago, the Minister of Health in Manitoba, Dave Chomiak at the time, was the longest health minister in Canada. And I knew Dave personally, and he had a tiny little bedpan around his neck that a nurse had given him. all the years he was health minister. It was a long time. And it was to remind him of the sufferings of patients. Now, you tell me whether it's worthwhile to pray for a man like that. I think it is. I remember Bill Blakey standing up in Winnipeg before high school students and listening to his colleagues in other parties saying, well, you know, politicians are terrible, this, that, and that. But there are politicians. And Bill said, well, I don't feel that way about politics. It's a noble calling. If you go back to Plato, Aristotle, the Greeks, etc., and I'm sure in other cultures as well, you'll see this nobility of the calling to politics. So are we as spiritual people in all our respective faith communities praying for our politicians? I think that's practically where we should start.
Okay. While we just have about 10 more minutes to go, if the participants have any questions, please type them in the chat so that we can ask our panelists. And while Doug has answered this question, my question is to Umran. Umran, do you feel that religious institutions are focused more on ceremonies and practices rather than on this spiritual upliftment? While our scriptures have been talking about spiritual upliftment, but over the years, why is it that spirituality is waning? It's the youngsters, especially when we talk to them, we find a disconnection. Or as far as Doug pointed out towards the politicians also, well, there are good and bad apples everywhere, but those who are doing good and those who are going, they are from within the community only. We are sending them. They are not from, Jupiter or Mars. They are coming from the same society where we are living. So the kind of society that we are creating with the scientific advancement we are talking about, but are we keeping up the pace as far as spiritually elevating ourselves?
Yes, thank you, Harpreet. It's a very good question. And as we see that many of the faith community leaders are struggling, when I was in, Nova Scotia, in smaller towns and cities, we see that sometimes when we used to go to different interface programs, most of the population will be 65 plus, and most of will be retired, and they struggle to bring in the youth. As census have shown, the youth is also somewhat of distance from religion or from any type of community. But by the grace of God, Islam is a religion that portrays and says that Islam is and God is a living God, and He listens to your prayers, and He's able to build that relationship with every single individual. As we believe that all of the religions were there for the particular time, for the particular need, and for the particular evil social problems that we're having, and this is why prophets came to remove those misinformation, to remove those misunderstandings and evil ideologies and sin and vices. However, Islam was a universal religion that was brought by the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, for all of mankind and for the end of the eternal day. So we still believe that Islam is a living religion, and we can build that relationship with God Almighty. And by in the Ahmadi Muslim community, we do have a branch within the Ahmadi Muslim community called the Ahmadi Muslim Youth Association, where we try to bring as much youth as possible, whether it is through sports, whether it's through education, whether it's through homework, whether it is through summer camps or any other activities. And it is Islam is that religion that is able to build that connection. And once you are able to build that connection with the youth, and they are able to build the connection with the community or God, then that is a connection that is everlasting. And we know that in this societal challenges that we face and all the evils that are around us, it is very hard to bring those youngsters to the right path. And not only it's the Ahmadi Muslim community, but I'm pretty sure all other communities face a similar situation where it's in these situations. So in general, Islam does present a living religion. Islam does present a living God, but it is that many of the people at this day and age need to reform themselves, need to look for the living God, to build that relationship. And it's not the Ahmadi Muslim community there's many different avenues and go towards different activities to try to get this accomplished as well.
Okay. There's a question for Doug from the participants that are we addicted to technology or to comfort? Khalil Gibran refers to the lust for comfort as that stealthy thing that enters the house as a guest and then becomes a host and then a master. Doug.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, we may be addicted to comfort too. Some people certainly are. Maybe addicted to many things. I think addiction is something that's inherent to human beings. But in terms of the discussion today, I think, become aware of an addiction that we're perhaps not aware of, to think of something conceptually in a different way, to think of ourselves as addicted to our technology, to the means rather than to the ends of things, is somewhat revolutionary. And this is why I'm serious in my call to all lawyers. I think that people from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different professions, whether it's medical, legal, philosophical, politician, whatever, they bring perspectives that are different. And on this topic, I really don't know of anyone who's as insightful that I've read as Alul. And so I'm sincere when I brought that up. In terms of comfort, was it years ago, I think Pierre Burton wrote The Comfortable Pew. So certainly I think we can be lulled by comfort. But you know, I'm feeling pretty uncomfortable these days with a lot of things that's going on in the public square. If it wasn't for Fareed Zakaria on CNN, I'd probably go half stark mad. So I don't know. I don't know where to take that comment other than to say, sure, I think we're addicted to many things.
Okay. There's another question. How can faiths and government cooperate for the common good? And I think Michael would be the right panelist to answer this. Yes, Michael.
Well, there was a earlier comment quite early on that by Nevada, Normata, and you know, I think it was feedback that when I look at the first comment about one voice, I'm obviously I don't believe any one person could speak on behalf of many, certainly not many religions and faiths. So I think the council here is an important council to bring faith-based leaders, religious leaders together, and then when necessary, as we saw in the pandemic, as Doug well knows, have opportunity to speak to government in terms of how to deal with public health orders, in that case, restrictions on faith-based gatherings. I think that there are opportunities for those more formal discussions to be had. I do appreciate the call to action, though, that Doug made here on this call, and I would say that it speaks to the nature of the legal profession, and I know that there are many lawyers who were involved with even those efforts, who have very strong spirituality and faith, and who were helping to advocate in many ways. So I think having individuals who have a different type of grounding, who understand legislative frameworks and working with governments, but also have at the core of their beliefs, personal or otherwise, I think identifying those individuals, I can think of a few with the Catholic Church, for example, that I've come to know, or I do know in other ways. You know, I think they're out there and trying to reach out to those skill sets to work with the council, but also to work with government, of course. There's ways that we need to action, I would say, action these items and identify more allies. People have an understanding. I think there can be a more deliberate approach that this council could utilize, and there's other groups. The other point that I would make, though, Doug asked the question about prayer for those in elected office, and I certainly there's the leadership prayer breakfast, of course, that's gone across the country. There was one recently in downtown Vancouver. I've attended that annually, and that's an example. But there's also Leading Influence in Victoria, which is another example of an organization that brings elected members and others in the community together to pray and to recognize. And I know that there is identification of elected representatives with their efforts. So there are a couple examples of what Doug is talking about, but I think what is as important to that is bringing people together. And I think the better mixing between government representatives and faith-based leaders and other community members is what is needed as well.
Right. And the MFSC also holds a community prayer breakfast in November. we just have a few minutes. So last question I would like to ask is that should we be looking at applying science to changing our economic and political systems to better reflect the spiritual values common to all religions? And along with that, another question that came forward from one of our participants is that in a world that says it wants peace but consistently chooses war, how do we return to our place of shared noble purpose? Any of the panelists, briefly, if you could answer this question. If nobody comes forwards, I choose.
Okay, I'll come forward for this one.
Please, yes.
Yes, according to the second question regarding peace, as we know that all religion promote peace and love for all, hatred for none, and each religion inherits that beautiful teaching. But unfortunately, when we see the chaos of war and bloodshed and innocent life being lost, this is something different and completely contrary to the teaching of religion and of course Islam. So you cannot mix religion or any for war and what those usually are vested behind political agendas, political ideologies, and other ways and means. Yes, we promote love for all, hatred for none as the Muslim community, and I'm pretty sure all other religions have the same fundamentality. But the main thing is that where we as the Muslim community believe, according to the teaching of Islam, is that where there is lack of absolute justice, and when justice is not being portrayed and not being implemented, whether it's a local level or all the way down to an international level, then things flare up locally, and then eventually it flares up and then goes on a national scale. The Muslim community leader, His Holiness Hazrat Mr. Mazur Ahmad, has been speaking with many dignitaries, politicians, traveling around the world in letting people know that they have to do their parts, whether it's politicians, whether it is faith leaders, where everyone has to play their role to make sure that we try to live in a harmonious environment and not repeat our history, what happened in World War I and what happened in World War II, and leave legacy and leave the world behind for our children, that they can remember us in good name.
Great. We would love to continue this discussion for long, but there's so much of wisdom we can learn from the panelists, but time doesn't permit. So thank you to all the panelists and to all the participants for sparing your valuable time and sharing your insightful views on this particular important topic. And as I basically said, spirituality is the foundation for our existence. Whatever we may strive for, but unless we are spiritually strong, we cannot progress. So let's imbibe the basic values, and spirituality has no religion. It is basically, again, loving unconditional love. And whatever we are, wherever we are, whether in business or as a politician or as a job we are working, whatever best we can do to make the society better, that is what we strive for, and we should all work for that. So thank you to all the panelists and the participants, and over to Sherry for introduction to the summation.
Oh, thank you. I think, one of the things that I would have liked to discuss more is what the spirit of collaboration means to everybody. Our Multi-Faith Summit Council is a prime example of diversity coming together for the common good. And that's what I would like to see flourish in all aspects of our community. So thank you to all of our panelists and our wonderful moderator. This has been a great event. And we appreciate the time that each of you has given to us today. To offer some closing remarks, we will turn a few minutes over to the Education Chair of the Multi-Faith Summit Council, Harold Rosen, who is a member of the Baha'i community and an interfaith educator. Please go ahead, Harold.
Yes, as a planner of this event, we thought that the topic was so big that it was really impossible. But we also thought that the topic was so important that we had to do it somehow. I'm stunned by how well we addressed, this big topic of science in relationship to religion and spirituality and moral commitment. There was a quote that was hovering over my head as I was listening to the discussion from Einstein: "Religion without science is blind, and science without religion is lame." I see that as a quote about balance, and we were talking a lot about balance, but also about integration, also about direction. I found the panel as a whole, and also Harpreet, how wonderful to have a pro at the helm. Oh my goodness, because you unpacked the questions in such a powerful way. You made the questions alive and work for all of us. And you're a good disciplinarian as well, kind as well as disciplined. You know, the panel as a whole had tremendous respect for faith and for science and for government, and even for the Multi-Faith Summit Council. That seemed to be something that united our panel. There was a lot of emphasis on dialogue and cooperation, and I thought the panel modeled it. You actually interacted with each other so respectfully, and you were obviously listening to each other. Another theme in common was take the wheel regarding AI. Specifically, I want to mention, Doug talked about direction and faith as co-responsible with science and government, and that we should pay a lot of attention to the direction of harm reduction and hold the wheel, but also be involved in prayer and grace. I heard Ned emphasizing the green balance of responsibility, importance of climate change, housing and healthcare, listening and respectful dialogue, being civil rather than partisan. And he also emphasized the complexity of the whole set of issues requiring a lot of cooperation. Umran reminded us of God as creator, fashioner, maker of beautiful forms, and Islam as a promoter of knowledge through the ages. He talked about constructive use of technology for our global village, a very powerful and universal theme. Michael talked about and represented in many ways the need for consultative respect, love for all, hate for none, inclusion of diverse perspectives. But he also proposed he was worried about science used as a government control technique. So I thought he was sort of engaging us in a question of conscience there, and politics as well. Aaron talked about faith and science as complementary, as we need both discovery in the case of science and we need tools as in the case of technology, that government should be a steward of the common good, that material and spiritual reality are both needed. Oh, and the idea of deep fakes, AI deep fakes, have to be counterbalanced by truthfulness. Anyway, there were a lot of gems, but that's a few of them. And I'm utterly delighted with the whole panel and with Harpreet and for all the people who attended. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harold. Well, I've sincerely enjoyed this event and hope that everyone feels that they have been enlightened in some way and are taking away new thoughts and new ideas on what has been presented. I add my thanks to all who participated in the program, with a special thanks to our organizing committee for making this happen, our technician, the panelists, and our guest moderator, and all of you, the audience who's attended today. Today's Interfaith Caucus will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel in the next week or so. If you would like to keep up with the Council, you can follow our Facebook page or visit our website, which I believe has been typed into the chat box. We have a new resource page that we are building, and you might want to check that out. If you appreciated this event, and in particular the topic today, we also invite you to send us an email to let us know how you enjoyed it, and if you have any suggestions for topics that you would like us to tackle in the future. You can also indicate whether you would like to be added to the Council's email list to receive news from the Council. We're winding up our time here, and we're in great time, actually. We're being really quick. I allowed 90 minutes and we're coming in under the wire, which is fantastic. Offering the closing prayer is Deacon Richard Chow, an executive member of the Multi-Faith Summit Council and a representative of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Vancouver. Please go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. Artificial intelligence and peace was the theme of the 57th World Day of Peace at the beginning of this year on January 1st, 2024. So as I was listening today, I just want to reflect on just half a minute on this from what Pope Francis says before we go into prayer. He says on that day, no scientific research and technological innovation is neutral. As fully human activities, The directions they take reflect choices conditioned by personal, social, cultural values in any given age. The same must be said of the results they produce, precisely as the fruit of specifically human ways of approaching the world around us. The latter always have an ethical dimension, closely linked to decision-making by those who design their experimentation and direct their production towards particular objectives. So with that reflection, let us conclude today's dialogue with a closing prayer. Dear God, we thank you for bringing us together to have this dialogue on the topic of scientific advancement and spiritual commitment for the service of humanity and the protection of our common home. We ask you to continue to help our faith leaders and civic leaders with wisdom and courage to address the need to develop ethical principles and regulations with responsibility and values that would guide the rapid advancement of technology, especially in the application of artificial intelligence. Help us to ensure technological benefits are distributed fairly and create opportunities and well-beings for the common good, upholding human dignity without prejudice, discrimination, and exploitation that are harmful and destructive. May our directions and actions will always find their origin in you, and through you reach completion for the good of all humanity, we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We can now end the recording. This brings us to a close. Thank you for being with us today, and we greatly appreciate